Hi. I think she actually did say Newfoundland and Labrador right, so kudos, you did it. I'm really excited to be here talking about something really near and dear to my heart, motherhood and engineering teams. So a little over 2 years ago today, I woke up feeling a little bit feverish and a little off. I knew I wasn't sick exactly, so in wondering what might be wrong, I realized that my period was a few days late. So I got and decided to take a pregnancy test, and 5 minutes later, 2 solid dark lines were staring back at me. In that moment, I knew I was pregnant. That sounds a lot like the movies, right? Every rom-com you see about being pregnant? Well, the truth is, that pregnancy test was one of over $360 worth I had bought that year. Most recently, opting into Amazon Subscribe and Save. And those 2 solid lines, well, I'd seen them once before. The last time I had seen them, 2 weeks later, I was in an architecture review at work when I experienced cramping, which I would later learn was a miscarriage. This story is so common. It's a hard one, but it's so common. We just don't talk about it. And there are so many people who try for so much longer, who experience so much more loss and pain along the way. Mine's a good one. 15% of known pregnancies actually end in miscarriage, a number which is in actuality much, much larger. A lot of people just don't know that they're pregnant when they're miscarrying. And at work, it can be kind of confusing. What happens when you have a miscarriage? Is that grief leave? Is it sick leave? It's hard to say. Parenthood for many of us actually begins the moment that we decide we want to start a family, however we decide to get there, and however long it takes us. What was very uncommon about my scenario was a situation I found myself in at work. I was leading an engineering team at a startup, and my due date was aligning with a moment of change. I found myself at 8 months pregnant, driving a due diligence process, and if you've done those before, you know how painful they are, and attending acquisition meetings on behalf of my company and our engineering organization. By the way, going into an acquisition talk at 8 months pregnant is a very good way to get a feeling for a company's culture. In this case, we transferred. The whole leadership team was just incredible, so kudos to them. So fast forward a couple weeks, and on July 27th, 2018, at 9:58 p.m., my son was born. And just hours earlier, my CEO had written me on Slack to share that the acquisition had been finalized. That is a lot of change for a single human in a single day. There's no documentation for navigating parenthood. And as a systems and processes thinker, I had to really quickly figure out and absorb as much as I could about how I could support both me and my engineering org through this change. I had also never seen somebody who looked like me before, a woman in an engineering management role stepping out for a long leave. So this talk is both for parents current and future, wherever you are on that journey, and most importantly, it's for every single person in this room. Because whether you have a family or not, you will, at some point, as leads and managers, have to support someone on your team through that change. So we're going to break it down into 3 sections: everything before baby arrives, everything after baby arrives, and the 4th trimester, and transitioning back to work. So let's start with the first thing, which is telling your team. So for parents, I recommend waiting till you feel comfortable, first and foremost. But most importantly for managers, this is an intense moment of vulnerability. Parents are looking for support, and a negative reaction when they come to tell you the news could actually trigger a fight or flight response that sends them interviewing. In fact, new research shows that when managers responded positively to a family announcement, the employee was found to be more engaged, more committed, and actually would stick around much longer for more than a year later, which is pretty incredible. So when somebody comes to you and says that they're starting a family, no matter how much you think it's going to hurt the business or your current product plans and OKRs, be positive, be excited, ask them what they're excited about, what they're worried about, And most importantly, ask how you can help them. Next, you have to create a transition plan. I recommend starting by just opening a notes file on your machine, and for 2 weeks, write out all the things you do as a lead. Every time you do something new, every time you're responsible for something new, write that down. Then prioritize that work. Are there things there that you could probably put on the back burner for a few months? In my case with the acquisition, we weren't going to be hiring for a little while, so that was a whole set of work that I could just kind of put aside. Next, take a delegation pass. Who on your team can take over this work? Can your manager take it on? Are there people you could give that work to while you're out? Do you need a backfill? And lastly, make sure to have this in place as early as you can. You never know what happens, especially if you're expecting via pregnancy. It's not uncommon to have to be put on bed rest or experience something called preeclampsia, which is blood pressure related. And although it's rare, it could happen. I had 2 friends go out 5 weeks early, and when you're looking at your due date as the date you're racing towards, it's not always the case. So we've all read about giving away our Legos, how important it is to delegate, and how good it is for our people. What about lending out our Legos? Let's go back to when we were in elementary school and you lent toys away. Terrifying, right? Would you get them all back? Would there be some missing, broken? What about when your elementary school friend lent that Lego to somebody else? Now it's degrees separated, never to be recovered. Well, jumping ahead to the end, the spoiler in my case is that my team was actually pretty anxious to give me back my Legos when I returned. And this will be different for everybody. In fact, I think they had a new appreciation for my Legos while I was out. So after baby arrives, first of all, as a parent, you should share the news. If you're like me, you probably spend more waking hours with your teams than you do anybody else. So add them to your announcement email thread if you have a mailing list that you put together. Or when you feel up to it, and there's a lot of adrenaline in the first couple of days, just post a quick note on Slack. Make sure they find out from you and not from somebody else. So how do we as teams support new parents? New parenthood is incredibly hard. I feel like everywhere, unanimously, they show everything up to that moment where baby is lying on a parent's chest and then nothing afterwards. For context, a baby's stomach is the size of a cherry when it's born. That means it has to feed every 2 to 3 hours. And then there's this whole thing called cluster feeding, where they feed for 3 to 4 hours straight. And what does this mean for you? It means you're not sleeping. And that's incredibly hard, and that, from what I've heard from others, goes on for years and years. There's also postpartum depression, which can actually occur anytime up to the first year after baby arrives. And postpartum depression actually goes just beyond birth parents. It's also common in adoptive and then partners as well. So these are all things as leads and managers we actually have to be looking out for a while. These aren't problems that go away when somebody comes back to work. So let's look at a quick high-level timeline of new parent support. Baby arrives, what's next? Give new parents space, and don't expect replies. Don't expect anything from them at all, actually. New parents are just in survival mode. If you want to send them a note of congrats, that's fine, but don't expect anything in return. So next, it's really nice to have a company policy, like a baby bonus or a gift that you give to new parents. I used to give all my friends flowers, which I thought was really nice, but now having had a baby, I did not want flowers. I actually just wanted food. So if there's something you want to do for your teams, a warm meal is kind of like a warm hug. It's one less thing a parent has to think about. And you can make it really easy these days with a food delivery gift card. A lot of us, we're expats living in these tech hubs away from our families and our communities. If I had had baby in Newfoundland and Labrador, where I'm from, I would have had a line of extended family down the block with casseroles. So about halfway through leave, it's good to check in to see if the parent is maybe interested in either coming to the office for a visit or going out for lunch. If they say no, don't be offended. This is their baby bonding time, and they can do with it what they want. We have no idea what they're going through, and if this is something they could even make happen at this point. For me, I decided to actually meet up with my coworkers for lunch, and it was a really important milestone. I was absolutely going through an identity crisis and didn't know how Tara the mom and Tara the engineering leader could ever coexist. Seeing them in the same physical space for me was this moment where I knew I could make it all work. Plus, I got to see my team with my baby, and I got to eat lunch with two hands. So 3/4 of the way through, and this is for managers, it's time to check in. Send an email to plan a call, and make sure there's a lot of buffer on either side. There is still no schedule at this point for most babies, depending on how long your leave is. So you want to give them a lot of breathing room. And you're doing two things on this call. The most important thing you're doing is listening, asking them how they're doing, how they're feeling, how it's going, what they can do to help you. And then you're trying to just broach the topic of if there's a transition plan. Have you thought about coming back? What might that look like? How can I help you? If you're finding that you're hearing signs of distress and that it's going to be really uncomfortable for the parent to come back when they're technically supposed to come back, that's a great moment to hit pause and to work with HR to see if you can come up with some options. It's actually, at Google, they found that by extending family leave by 6 weeks, they actually saw their rate of attrition go back to normal, basically. It had been double for moms who had been returning. So they would come back and then they would quit. So in just extending it by a few weeks, that might be all you need to help a parent who's really struggling slowly transition back. So transition plans are becoming really common these days. So if you can use like vacation time or unpaid time and create a plan where they come back for like 1 day, 3 days, 4 days, leading up to a full schedule, that's incredibly helpful. And then shaping our back to work transition team. So Lara Hogan has this really great management Voltron bingo card that I love for building out your management peer network. When I was going back, I was very much in like lonely mom isolation mode. Just going through the exercise of writing out the people who had my back, who I could count on, and who I could delegate to help me with the transition was extremely important. And I leaned on this team for a few things. I asked my manager to go figure out the mother's room situation for me. I was breastfeeding and would be pumping, and because of the acquisition, we at that point were in a WeWork space. So he went and he did a full video tour, and just having that, just seeing that, it meant the world to me. And it made me feel so much more comfortable. I knew exactly what to expect on day one. I had told another coworker here who had reached out that I was really stressed about storing my milk at work. Again, shared fridge, and milk is incredibly precious. For a lot of us, it can be hard to even produce the amount you need every day for baby. So my coworker went and bought a mini fridge, and it was waiting for me on my first day. It was just like the kindest gift in that moment. So transitioning back to work, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The first day is really, 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 really hard. Although I will say, and friends had told me this, the anticipation's a lot worse. On my first day back, I rode the subway, I live in New York, and I cried 3 times. I got out, I walked around the office to calm down, and I went inside. I poured a cup of coffee, I opened GitHub and Slack, and I got to drink that coffee with 2 hands. In that moment, I realized how important this was for me. I love building products. This was me. It was a moment where I felt like I'd reclaimed a part of my identity, and I knew that I would have to figure out a way to do both. So to make your first day easier, go back on a Friday. That means it's just 1 day between you and baby. Makes it a lot easier emotionally. Don't have too many transitions in a single day, so don't have childcare starting the same day you're going back. That's just way too much for anyone. And be extra kind to yourself. If you have to go FaceTime baby if you want to go walk outside, if you want to leave early, do all of those things. And managers, let's give people permission to do them. Next, so we talk about a 30, 60, 90 plan for onboarding, but we never talk about what a transition plan looks like for people after an extended leave. For me, I structured it as a 15, 30, 45-day plan. And I kind of took the steps as inspired by the book, The Fifth Trimester, which is all about going back to work. And the author of that book, Lauren Brody, she actually recommends for the first few weeks, you're just listening. So the only thing you have to do is set up one-on-ones, basically. So I met with peers, I met with managers, leaders, new people. That's a fun thing about when you go on leave. There's like new people who are there when you come back. And you're just listening. You're listening for your Legos. You're listening for new work, new problems. You're understanding what all has changed. And you're looking for work to basically pick up. In the first 30 days, you're starting to take back those Legos. And then the first 45, you start to lead 1 or 2 projects. The important thing during this transition is that you're iterating on your own routine. Because our parents coming back, they're not just coming back to work and work that they know, they're actually getting an entire human being ready before they can get ready, and then dropping them off somewhere, and then picking them up, and then doing that all over again, and that's a lot of adjustment. So iterate on your schedule. Use this time to figure out what's working with whomever you have in your family who's supporting you as a parent, and make changes to make it work for you. Next, communicating our schedule. So before baby, I was totally the person who would come in at 11. I was working with a team that was partially based on the West Coast. So that was both a perk for me and I guess maybe a late start for some others. And then I would leave anywhere between 7 and 9. It wasn't uncommon that we would order food, hang out, go for a coffee in the middle of the afternoon. Post-baby, I am on my childcare schedule. So it's very much like a 9 to 4:30, so that I can meet, pick up, and drop off as needed. And then I tell my team, hey, I'll be online also after baby goes to bed for like an hour. And I do that because I enjoy it, and I like the flexibility that this provides. This also gives me time in the morning with baby, and it gives me like 2 hours when I get home and before bed, which is really important to me. Also, just really quickly, like parents are the most productive people I've ever worked with. So I feel like in my new schedule, I get so much more done than I did in my old schedule. It's really crazy. So lastly, normalizing parenthood. There's an economist named Emily Oster, and she came out with this book this year called Crib Sheets. And it's a data-driven, data-based guide to parenting, which for I'm sure many of us, sounds great. We all lean more heavily towards that kind of data and information anyways. She also wrote this great piece in The Atlantic called End the Plague of Secret Parenting, where she talks about the fact that we just don't talk about parenting at work. We talk about our pets, we talk about our weekends, but it's very rare that we actually talk about the stresses of being a new parent. For many of us, we think it's a perception problem, that people will think that we're not performing well if we're talking about it. Well, she says, we can't fix problems that we pretend don't exist. We can't improve the lot of parents at work if we pretend we aren't parents. For me, with my team, I came back, and because it had been so shocking to me what parenthood really looked like, I talked about it very openly. I would tell people when I was going to go pump, and I didn't try to sugarcoat anything. This is what it's like. And something crazy happened. I found that my team would actually start to end meetings on time, and they would tell me that I had to go pump. I was not expecting that. If we talk about parenting at work, we're letting our teams know that they can do it too. We're letting them know about the hard stuff and the good stuff. We're giving permission. I'll end with this. They say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, maybe more importantly, it also takes a village to support a parent. We, as leads and managers, teams and companies, make up a huge part of that village for our people. And if we can create and foster cultures of compassion and empathy and support our people through tough and very human transitions, we won't just retain our people longer, but we may just find that our products, team, companies, and industry are more diverse and inclusive because of it. Thank you, and a special thanks to my village, who I would not be here without. Thanks.